Hello again, friends. Well, yes, back at the airport, back here at Moorabbin Airport. No, I'm not. Hello again, friends. We're back at the airport, back here at Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport, flying to Sydney once again. I do it a lot on this channel, as you know. However, is it better to fly privately, fly yourself in your own plane, or fly commercially? That's what I want to find out today. Hi. Good, how are you, mate? Just off to the airport, please. So any of you pilots out there, or you travellers, or just anyone who's interested in the comparison, thought I'd try something a little bit different on this flight, because what I want to do is I want to compare if it's actually better to fly privately between Melbourne and Sydney in my instance, or if it's better to fly commercially. So when I say better, what I've done is I've divided this whole exercise up into three main areas. So for this exercise, what I want to do is I want to look at, first of all, time. The time it takes, and I mean door to door, not just the flight time, but from leaving the house, getting to whichever airport you're going to, the flight itself, and then the other end getting to whatever your destination is. Secondly, I want to look at cost. How much does it cost to get yourself either in your private plane or on a commercial plane, in my instance today, from Melbourne to Sydney. And thirdly, I kind of want to look at this other factor, which is a bit of a, it's hard to quantify, but it's basically comfort and flexibility. Which is it better to do? Is it better? Is it more comfortable? Is it more flexible? All the kind of unquantifiable things, the pros and cons of flying yourself or flying commercially. So let's start off with travel time then. So in my case, when I travel to the airport and fly Kilo Juliet November, it takes me about 25 minutes to drive from my house to Moorabbin Airport. However, if I'm travelling to Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport here, I asked my Uber driver on the way here how long he thought it would take. He thought it would take about 30 minutes. Alright, do you know roughly what time you think we'll get there at the airport? Just looking.
Half an hour.
About half an hour? Yeah, cool, thank you. But that's never the case. There's always traffic. Today took about 45 minutes door to door. On a good day, 45 minutes is pretty much what you'll get. On a bad day, I've had anything from like an hour to an hour and a quarter. So kind of averaging it all out. For me, to Moorabbin is about 25 minutes, but getting to this airport here, I'd probably say is more like 45. Now, of course, just a quick caveat here whilst we're talking about time, it does depend which airport you're traveling to. You might live right next door to an international airport, and you might live 100 billion miles away from your local general aviation airport. I'm just doing this as an example, okay? You put your own figures in here, but I'm just saying for me, it's actually a little bit quicker to travel to my local general aviation airport than it is to travel out of town to the domestic international terminal. So next up then, of course, there's the time at the airport itself once you've arrived. And for me, when I'm pre-flighting a plane and flying privately, it usually, and doing the flight plan, of course, and all those things that you need to do to get the aircraft ready to go, I usually give myself about half an hour for that from start to finish. Once I get to the airport here, it's actually 8 o'clock now, and my flight's not until 9 o'clock, and I do generally give myself about an hour's time to get down to the airport, make sure I'm not late, if there's any traffic, contingency, etc. Plus, remember, you've got to board your aircraft, at least a domestic flight, 20 minutes beforehand. So for the wait time, once you've actually got to the airport, I'm going to put 30 minutes down for the private flight, flying yourself, and 45 minutes to an hour, but let's say 45 minutes again when you're flying commercially. And then, of course, there's the flight itself and the time it takes to travel from Melbourne, in this case, to Sydney. We're going to do that in a second, but first, snacks. So then when it comes to flight time itself, got a sandwich stuck in my tooth. When I flew from Melbourne to Sydney last week in Kilo Juliet November, that took basically about just over 2 hours. So 2 hours 10 minutes, 2 hours 20 minutes. Let's say 2 hours 20 minutes with a bit of contingency. This flight with Qantas generally takes about an hour. So anytime you might be saving getting to the airport a little bit sooner, not having to wait around at the airport as long, you're kind of like losing that when you're flying privately, because of course you're going a lot slower. But then of course what else you need to look at? You need to look at the time it takes when you get to the airport at the other end. Now when I land in Sydney, I need to get a taxi. Waiting in the taxi queue can be anything from going straight to the front of the taxi queue to sometimes having to wait. I've honestly waited for about an hour in the taxi queue and then another hour to get from Sydney Airport into the city. When I land at Bankstown, what I do is I jump in a hire car, take that hire car into the city. It did take me quite a long time because of traffic, but generally, apart from the paperwork and picking up the car itself, you're pretty much landing at the airport and you can be out of there probably in a matter of about half an hour. Also take a look at this. Look, how good is it coming to the Qantas lounge for pretty much the last flight out of here to Sydney? Look, I've got the whole place to myself. I can sit anywhere I want. So let's talk cost then. So this flight itself, flying from Melbourne to Sydney, usually for one of the what Qantas call their red E-deals is about $250. I think this was $244. When I fly Kilo Juliet November now, of course these calculations here come down to the aircraft that you're going to fly, the amount of time that you're going to be flying it, so how long it's going to take you to get from one place to the other. But when I fly Kilo Juliet November, it takes me about, like I said before, let's say about 2.4 hours. The hourly rate, as I've shared on this channel before, is $300 per hour. So you can easily work that out with a calculator at $720. Easy calculation. Plus you've got to put your fuel on top of that, and when I was refueling in Bankstown, that came to around $300 worth of fuel. So let's just say, nice round figures, the flight itself from Moorabbin to Sydney cost $1,000 to fly in the SR22. Now just whilst I'm recording this, let me share something very cool with you as well. Look at this. Now there is one other thing that I want to talk to you in terms of cost before we go on to the next point, but we are coming into Sydney in a second, so let's land, get to the hotel, and then I'll finish up talking about costs.
Thank you. We're very shortly starting out of Sydney to Sydney. Our trip today is towards the east, landing up to the north.
Okay, yes, regular viewers will know that we are back in Melbourne, so good. Continuity alert, continuity alert. Yeah, so after I jumped on that bed, I basically fell asleep, woke up the next day, I had to do a conference call, went into work for a bunch of meetings, I had the work Christmas party, and then jumped back on a plane and flew back home to Melbourne, looked at the footage and realised I didn't shoot an ending to the video. So we still need to look at that comfort and flexibility that I was talking about before, because of course up until now it looks like it kind of takes longer to fly and it's going to cost you more if you want to fly yourself rather than flying commercially. So why do it? So let's look at flexibility to start with. Now, one of the key things with flexibility is if you are booking a ticket, you're booking the cheapest ticket on a commercial airline, often you can't change the time. You'll either get a penalty or you'll lose your fare entirely. Whereas if you're flying privately, of course you can fly whenever you want. If you're in a meeting and you need to stay somewhere for longer, you don't need to worry that you've got to get back quickly to catch the 5 o'clock home. As long as you can fly after hours or at night time or in whatever conditions you're flying in, you can basically decide to fly whenever you want. So that comes a little bit back to the cost factor as well, because remember that $244 fare we were looking at before? If you do want the flexibility to fly with Qantas and you want to be able to change the time to another flight, that price almost doubles. So flexibility is an important one. If you know that you need flexibility in travel, sometimes flying privately may actually work out not to be as expensive as you think compared to flying commercially. Then what about the airports themselves? Well, in my instance, I was flying between Melbourne and Sydney. However, what if you're not going to a major metropolitan city? Sometimes you might not have the option to go either direct or to get to an airport at all, so you need to land somewhere and then get ground transport across to your meeting. If you've got a regional airfield which is closer to your destination than an airport where a commercial airline operates in, even though it might take you longer to fly that distance, the fact that you can't get there on a commercial airline might actually mean it's quicker to fly yourself. And then finally, of course, the thing you can't quantify. A lot of the time, this decision comes down to the fun factor. Now, of course, flying yourself can be stressful. You've got to do the planning. It's going to take you longer. It might cost you more. All those reasons that we've discussed already. But at the end of the day, you're flying yourself. That is fun. That is one of the reasons why a lot of us got our private pilot's licenses in the first place, so we can go places. And final question then, will I do this again? Will I fly between Melbourne and Sydney myself again, or is that just it for me now? Well, yes, I will, but I'm going to change a couple of things, and these are my tips for yourselves if you're thinking of doing something similar. What I'm going to be doing next time is I'm not going to try and replicate the same flying that I do when I'm flying commercially. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to try and go up and down in one day. Instead, next time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go up the night before. So plan the flight in the morning, maybe fly during the day or in the early afternoon, get to Sydney, stay with family or friends or find a cheap hotel in the city, and then wake up the next morning fresh and ready for the meetings, and then just focus on that. And that way I can completely separate the flying from the business, and I'm not trying to replicate the same experience that I get when I'm flying commercially. All right, what are your thoughts? If you do this kind of flying more regularly than I do, if you fly yourself to and from business meetings as a private pilot, share some of your tips below and give us a like if you enjoyed that. Make sure you click on that subscribe button if you haven't done already. Otherwise, thank you as always for watching. I'll see you in the next video.